Let me be direct with you from the outset. What is unfolding in Taiwan right now is not a crisis. It is not even a pre-crisis. What is unfolding is the final phase of a 75-year geopolitical question that is about to be answered, and the answer will reshape global power dynamics for the rest of this century. I am looking at commercial satellite imagery from April 28, 2026, showing something that has received almost no coverage in Western media. What it shows is not an amphibious assault fleet. It is not a missile buildup. What it shows is 14 roll-on roll-off civilian ferries, the kind used for cars and cargo, undergoing simultaneous modifications at Chinese shipyards that convert them into troop transport vessels capable of carrying 2,000 soldiers each with their equipment. This is not military posturing. This is systematic preparation for operations that China plans to conduct whether the world is paying attention or not. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why the Taiwan question is being decided right now in 2026, why the United States cannot prevent Chinese action without risking nuclear escalation, and why the semiconductor supply chain that powers your phone, your car, and your entire digital life is about to experience a disruption that will make the pandemic supply chain crisis look trivial. This is the most important geopolitical development of 2026, and most people are completely unaware it is happening. Subscribe now because what we are about to cover is being wargamed by Chinese and American military planners simultaneously. Let us start with the timeline because understanding why 2026 matters requires understanding what changed in the past 18 months. Taiwan is not a new issue. The question of Taiwan's status has existed since 1949, but several developments have converged in 2026 that make this year fundamentally different from every year that preceded it. First, Chinese military capability has reached parity with the United States in the Western Pacific. According to the U.S. Department of Defense's 2025 China Military Power Report, the People's Liberation Army Navy now operates more ships than the U.S. Navy, 370 vessels compared to 295. More importantly, those ships are concentrated in a single theater, the Western Pacific, while American ships are distributed globally. In any Taiwan scenario, China would have local numerical superiority. Second, American political will to defend Taiwan is at its lowest point in decades. According to polling conducted by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs in March 2026, only 42% of Americans support using U.S. military force to defend Taiwan if China invades. That number was 58% in 2021. The Ukraine conflict, the economic costs of sustained military aid, and war fatigue have fundamentally shifted American public opinion. President Xi Jinping reads the same polls that American politicians read. Third, semiconductor leverage is diminishing. Taiwan produces approximately 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors through Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. That fact has been Taiwan's insurance policy for decades. But TSMC is building massive fabrication plants in Arizona, Japan, and Germany. Those facilities will not reach full production capacity until 2027 or 2028, but the trajectory is clear. Every month that passes, Taiwan's semiconductor monopoly weakens, and with it, the economic deterrent to Chinese action. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing the timeline is tighter than you thought. Now let us talk about what China has actually built in preparation for Taiwan operations because this is not speculation. This is observable military preparation. Announcement number 1, the Joint Logistics Support Force reorganization. And this one matters more than any weapon system because wars are won by logistics, not firepower. In January 2026, the People's Liberation Army completed a major reorganization of its Joint Logistics Support Force, the command responsible for moving troops, equipment, and supplies during military operations. According to reports from the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, and confirmed by Taiwanese military intelligence, this reorganization created 5 new large-scale logistics bases directly across the Taiwan Strait in Fujian Province. These bases are not ammunition depots. They are complete military logistics hubs with fuel storage, medical facilities, vehicle maintenance capabilities, and communications infrastructure. Each base is connected to existing rail and highway networks, allowing rapid movement of forces from interior China to staging areas on the coast. Satellite imagery shows new port facilities capable of handling simultaneous loading of dozens of transport vessels. Colonel Grant Newsham, a retired U.S. Marine Corps officer and former liaison to the Japan Self-Defense Forces, has stated publicly that, and I am quoting him directly, "What we are observing is not deterrence. This is pre-positioning for specific operations. You do not build this infrastructure unless you intend to use it, and you intend to use it soon." China currently maintains approximately 200,000 troops in the Eastern Theater Command, the military region responsible for Taiwan operations. But the logistics infrastructure being built can support force deployments 2 to 3 times that size. That number matters because it indicates planning for sustained operations, not a quick decapitation strike. China is preparing for the possibility that Taiwan resists, that international forces intervene, and that operations last weeks or months rather than days. Received. That is announcement number one. Now stay with me because this is where American military options start to look genuinely limited and where the assumptions that have guided U.S. policy for 40 years begin to collapse. Announcement number two, the anti-access area denial envelope. This is the part that Pentagon planners describe as the operational challenge that has no good solutions. China has deployed an overlapping network of air defense systems, anti-ship missiles, and surveillance assets that create what military theorists call an anti-access area denial zone, extending approximately 1,000 miles from the Chinese coast. Any American aircraft carrier attempting to operate within this zone faces coordinated attacks from land-based missiles, submarines, and aircraft that can overwhelm defensive systems through sheer volume. According to wargame simulations conducted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies and published in January 2026, the United States loses an average of 2 aircraft carriers, between 10 and 20 major surface combatants, and approximately 3,000 personnel in the first week of conflict over Taiwan. Even in scenarios where the United States ultimately prevents a successful Chinese invasion, the costs are described as, and I am quoting the report directly, strategically unsustainable and politically catastrophic. Think carefully about what this means. American carrier strike groups, the primary instrument of U.S. power projection for 75 years, cannot operate safely within range of Taiwan without accepting losses that would represent the worst naval defeat since World War II. The United States can still intervene, but intervention means trading blood and treasure at ratios that no American president can sustain politically. But it gets worse. China has also invested heavily in cyber warfare and electronic warfare capabilities specifically designed to disrupt American command and control systems. According to testimony by General Paul Nakasone, former director of the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, Chinese cyber capabilities could delay American force deployment by 48 to 72 hours in a Taiwan contingency by attacking logistics systems, communications networks, and satellite infrastructure. In a scenario where hours matter, a 72-hour delay could be decisive. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense publicly acknowledged in March 2026 that Taiwan can hold out approximately 14 days against a full-scale Chinese invasion before ammunition and supplies run critically low. If American reinforcements are delayed by even 3 days due to Chinese cyber attacks, and if American carrier groups remain outside the anti-access envelope to avoid catastrophic losses, Taiwan falls before American power can be brought to bear. Received. That is announcement number 2. Announcement number 3. And this is the one that almost nobody is discussing openly. The semiconductor hostage scenario. TSMC's fabrication facilities in Taiwan are the most advanced semiconductor manufacturing plants in the world. They produce chips for Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, and virtually every major technology company on Earth. These facilities cannot be relocated quickly. They cannot be rebuilt elsewhere in less than 5 years. And they are absolutely vulnerable to military action. According to analysis by the Semiconductor Industry Association, if TSMC's Taiwan operations were disrupted for 6 months, global GDP would contract by approximately $2 trillion. Smartphone production would halt, automotive manufacturing would stop, data center expansion would freeze. Every sector of the global economy dependent on advanced semiconductors would face immediate supply shocks. But here is the truly terrifying part. China does not need to capture those facilities intact. In fact, there are strategic arguments that China benefits from their destruction. If TSMC's Taiwan fabs are destroyed during conflict, either by Chinese action or Taiwanese scorched earth defensive measures, the global economy immediately becomes dependent on Chinese semiconductor production for all but the most advanced chips. China already dominates production of mature node semiconductors. Destroying TSMC's advanced capabilities would eliminate the primary competitor. Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, gave a remarkably candid interview to CBS News in April 2026 where he stated that Taiwan's semiconductor industry is, and I am quoting him, a silicon shield. But shields can be shattered, and the economic fallout from that shattering may be worse than the military fallout. That is the founder of the company acknowledging that the deterrent value of semiconductors is not as reliable as policymakers assume. If you own a technology company, if you work in industries dependent on semiconductors, if you have investments in supply chain dependent sectors, what is happening in Taiwan is not geopolitics. It is existential business risk. And if you are a consumer wondering why your next phone might cost 40% more or be unavailable entirely, this is why. Now let us talk about what is really happening behind the official statements because there are 2 realities and only one of them is being discussed publicly. The public position of the United States is strategic ambiguity. Washington does not formally recognize Taiwan as independent, but it also does not rule out defending Taiwan if attacked. This policy has worked for decades because it leaves Beijing uncertain about American responses. But strategic ambiguity only functions as deterrence if the adversary believes you might actually intervene. And right now, an increasing number of Chinese strategists believe the United States will not intervene with force. According to leaked assessments reported by the Financial Times, Chinese military planners have concluded that the United States will impose severe economic sanctions, provide Taiwan with weapons and intelligence, and condemn Chinese action internationally, but will not commit ground forces or accept carrier losses. This assessment may be wrong, but if Beijing believes it, then deterrence has already failed. Meanwhile, the reality that Washington cannot state publicly is that the United States has no good military options that do not risk nuclear escalation. Every war game, every simulation, every serious analysis concludes that a conventional conflict over Taiwan either ends with unacceptable American losses or escalates beyond conventional warfare. And once you introduce nuclear weapons into the scenario, all analysis becomes speculation about civilizational survival. President Biden stated multiple times that the United States would defend Taiwan. President Trump has been far more ambiguous, suggesting that Taiwan should pay for its own defense. But presidential statements matter less than operational capability, and the operational capability to successfully defend Taiwan at acceptable cost is eroding with every S-400 battery China deploys, every Type 055 destroyer it launches, and every day that American shipyards fail to match Chinese production rates. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States makes security commitments it cannot fulfill without catastrophic costs, those commitments become bluffs. And bluffs only work until they are called. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time the lesson is the same. Let me give you the historical parallel because it should terrify anyone paying attention. Thermopylae. The ancient Greek city-states knew Persia was coming. They had years to prepare. They built alliances, fortified positions, trained armies. And when Persia finally invaded with overwhelming force, the Greeks fought with incredible courage at Thermopylae, held for 3 days, and were ultimately overrun. The defense became legendary, but Persia still conquered Greece. Courage cannot substitute for force parity. Here is the parallel. Taiwan knows China is preparing. Taiwan has spent decades building defenses, training reserves, stockpiling ammunition. The United States has sold Taiwan weapons, conducted joint exercises, made supportive statements. But when China moves with the full weight of its military and economic power, none of that may matter. The question is not whether Taiwan fights. Taiwan will fight. The question is whether Taiwan can hold long enough for international intervention to shift the balance. And right now the answer appears to be no. The parallel is exact. Thermopylae was a heroic defeat that delayed but did not prevent conquest. Taiwan could become the 21st century version, a brave resistance that ultimately fails because the force differential is too great and Allied reinforcements arrive too late or not at all. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 scenarios because there is no simple path forward. Scenario 1, the status quo holds. China continues military buildup but does not act. Taiwan continues to strengthen defenses. The United States continues strategic ambiguity. This scenario requires that Beijing believes the costs of action still outweigh the benefits. But every month that passes, Chinese capability improves and American relative advantage declines. The status quo has an expiration date. Scenario 2, negotiated resolution. Taiwan and China reach some form of political accommodation, perhaps a Hong Kong-style one country, two systems arrangement, or a formalized status quo that Beijing can claim as reunification and Taipei can claim as preserved autonomy. This would require compromise from both sides that neither has shown willingness to make. And it would require the United States to accept an outcome it has opposed for 75 years. Scenario 3, conflict. China acts militarily within the next 24 months, either through blockade or invasion. The United States responds with sanctions and arms shipments, but not direct military intervention. Taiwan resists, but is ultimately overwhelmed. The global economy experiences the worst supply chain shock in modern history, and the post-World War II security order in Asia collapses. I think scenario 3 is more likely than most analysts are willing to state publicly. Chinese domestic politics favor action. President Xi has made reunification a core political objective. The economic costs of delay are increasing as semiconductor leverage diminishes, and the military balance is as favorable as it is ever likely to be for Beijing. The convergence of these factors creates a window of opportunity that closes in 2027 or 2028. Here are the questions I want you to take away. If Taiwan falls, what happens to U.S. alliances with Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, who all depend on American security guarantees? If TSMC's facilities are destroyed or captured, how long before the global economy recovers, and who dominates semiconductor production in the aftermath? And if the United States chooses not to intervene militarily, what does that mean for American credibility in every other region where Washington has made security commitments? Tell me in the comments what you think happens. Tell me if you think China moves in 2026 or waits. Tell me if you think the United States would actually risk carrier battle groups to defend Taiwan. We will keep tracking every development, every military exercise, every political statement, because what happens with Taiwan will define this decade and possibly this century. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with anyone who needs to understand what is actually at stake in the Western Pacific. Turn on notifications because the next 12 to 18 months will answer a question that has hung over global politics for 75 years. We will see you in the next analysis.